You might know by now what time period I was growing up in if you have the godly sleuthing skills of Steve from Blue's Clues, which would mean you probably understand or even experience for yourself the nostalgia that I have for this period. I wanted to do a really big lost media video, and one of the most popular subgenres of lost media happens to be children's media for this exact nostalgic feeling. So why not take advantage of what I know best and what I know people like the best? Today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite pieces of childhood lost media. I do want to just give a fair warning that at the time of writing this video, all of the information given was correct. Usually I wouldn't bring this up for a singular topic or a few topics, but the landscape of lost media is ever-changing, especially recently, so I want to have everything in such a big video as correct as possible, and leave things that are currently open-ended, well, open-ended. Not everything I will be discussing is still lost or as lost as it may have once been, and as is the nature of lost kids media, a good amount of the entries for each topic will be some kind of pilot.
I know something that I want to share.
The first entry on this list is kinda gonna be a cheaty one because I didn't actually watch this as a kid, but I did watch it later in life, and I would have watched it as a kid if I'd known about it. I wanted to talk about it because it is one of the more severe cases of lost media that I know of. The Puzzle Place is a children's puppet show that premiered on PBS in September of 1994 that had a production split between two companies, KCET of Los Angeles, California, and Lancet Media of New York City, New York. The show would follow a group of kids and the daily events taking place at what served as their clubhouse, the Puzzle Place. Exploring a theme of multiculturalism that was more prevalent at the time, each of the 6 puppet children featured in the show came from a different ethnic background. Julie Wu was a Chinese-American girl performed by puppeteer Alice Danayan and was basically the head of the group and practically the owner of the Puzzle Place itself. She would oftentimes act as a gracious host towards her friends Ben Olofsson, a Norwegian-American boy performed by Jim Martin, Kiki Flores, a Mexican-American girl performed by Sesame Street's Carmen Osbar, Leon McNeil, an African-American boy aptly named after his performer Noel McNeil, who will appear multiple times in this video, Jodie Silver, a Jewish-Lithuanian-American girl performed at different times by Alison Mork, Stephanie DeBruzzo, and Terry Hardin. And finally Sky Nakai, a Western Apache boy, performed at different times by Peter Linz and current Kermit performer Matt Vogel. Each of the kids brought their own kind of personality to the group. Each episode would explore a certain issue or question the kids had either on their own or among the group, often a matter of racial or cultural themes, tackling big problems like racism, sexism, and even stereotyping at times.
I just wish I knew why Jimmy's mom was acting so weird.
Well, I could be wrong, Leon, but I don't think she wants you to come to the party.
What? That's impossible.
Well, you know I live on the reservation, right?
Right?
Well, there's this general store just outside of it. The people who own it aren't Indians. Their son and I want to play together, but his parents won't let us.
How come?
They're prejudiced, Leon.
Since each of the children came from a different background, the show would highlight the ways in which they were all different from each other, both in terms of their personalities and backgrounds. It was ahead of its time in the way it tackled real-world problems from a very relatable and understandable point of view. It introduced concepts of what kids might deal with in their lives and painted out the ways to handle them, while at the same time encouraging kids to embrace their background and who they are. The show was revered for this and saw quite a lot of episodes running from 1994 to 1998, amassing 75 in total, airing every weekday on PBS. The Puzzle Place has seen only a small home release in the form of 6 VHS tapes, but even then, these tapes only have 1 episode each on them, and one looks to be as if it only compiles some of the songs sung in multiple episodes. The show has since been lost to time, as not a lot of home recordings exist of the show from their initial air or reruns, and again, the home release for it was limited. Compared to other similar competitors, the budget for the show was relatively limited as well, meaning that most of the money for the actual show, especially in times where the production struggled to secure funds for it later into its lifespan, went toward creating the show itself, rather than funding the sort of mass release that, say, Sesame Street may have. Even worse, once the show's run ended and no more episodes were being produced, the true rights to the show were in question, and even to this day, nobody knows for sure which of the 2 production companies, of which one has since disappeared, have it in their possession, or have the right to release it in some way, if it even still belongs to either of them at all. PBS doesn't seem to have any ownership of it, despite it having aired on their network. The effort and money needed to potentially buy out the rights from whoever is willing to come forward with them, or even knows who has them, is insurmountable, which is why it doesn't look like the Puzzle Place will see itself whole for the foreseeable future. It's sad to think that a show that had so much of an impact and so bold and educational of a message may forever be inaccessible. There are home recordings and VHS rips available on YouTube in varying quality. Just about 45 of the episodes, 30 in their full form, have yet to be found in any way.
Nick Jr. We'll be right back.
The breaks in between shows are often the most easily lost pieces of media, because they're seen as inconsequential, not as important as the shows they split up. But that doesn't mean that a good amount of thought and effort doesn't also go into these bumpers, interstitials, and such. Even some of the more famous bumpers, such as Disney's Wand IDs, haven't been completely archived, and that's really saying something. There are dedicated efforts made to archive this kind of content just because of how easy they are to lose, as channels don't often announce rebrands, the effects of which usually mainly impact the channel's bumpers. Bumpers can be lost overnight in these cases, gone without a trace other than on past home recordings. Such is the case for one of Nick Jr.'s most popular sets of bumpers, the face bumpers. Beginning in the 90s, when a show on Nick Jr. would either go on a commercial break or one would end and the other begin, a bumper would play between the show and whatever was to come that featured a simple face on a colored background that would speak to the audience about the show that was just on or the show coming up. Sometimes what he said wouldn't be specific to either, and would rather just be something in his joking and fun nature. The colored background for these bumpers would be different each time, and the host, face, would look exactly the same, a disembodied face plastered over the color. Wacky and expressive, Face was a character all on his own, regardless of whether he had his own show on the channel. Some kids were frightened by him, others embraced him and found a fondness for him, such as I had. I had mostly seen the newer version of Face from late in his life by 2004, and even then I only vaguely remember him because I was literally me as a baby. But having seen him another handful of times since then, even though I don't know when this might have been, he's remained in my memory. A massive amount of these bumpers were created, and a lot of them have multiple versions based on what show it was designed to introduce. Over time, these shows would end, so those specific bumpers would no longer need to be used, so would no longer air. After Face was retired completely sometime in 2004, archivists were left with no chance to properly archive these bumpers, outside of pre-recorded tapings of Nick's Young Children's block or Nick Jr. In recent years, an effort has been made to find them this way off of these recordings. It can be noted that the face bumpers also aired in different countries, meaning that we do have archives of bumpers that we got in the States that are exactly the same, just with a different voice for Face. There isn't really a way to know how many there are without being able to access them, but there have been lengthy lists made of the ones that have been confirmed to exist. Of the dozens and dozens of American face bumpers, quite a small percentage of them have actually been found and archived. And since there are so many versions of one concept, it's kind of a big task to seek out every version of the one bumper. I've never made any such effort myself for anything, but I can imagine it can get really boring really quick, and very frustrating when you keep seeing the same one over and over. I think the hunt for these was bigger in the past, I'm sure it's still ongoing in some way, but I don't see people talk about them as much as they used to.
Whoa.
Like I mentioned before, one of the greatest detectives of my time was Steve from Blue's Clues, but also Joe from Blue's Clues, and now Josh, of course. But regardless, Blue's Clues is a show that I feel doesn't necessarily need an introduction, but I will do it anyway. Blue's Clues is a Nickelodeon children's educational show from 1996 that implements an interactive element between the audience and a host, a live actor who is set in a world that is otherwise animated. The host follows the clues that his dog, Blue, leaves behind to give an idea of what she is up to that day, with the show ending with both the host and audience joining in on the fun alongside her and other characters that live in the home with them, including an array of living objects such as a mailbox, shovel, pail, salt and pepper shakers with their daughter, a paprika shaker, a bar of soap, and some other animals like cats and dogs other than Blue herself. The show would be a general romp through the environment and the world that the home is set in, with the host seeking out these clues and interacting with other characters and the audience to help piece together what they mean, all the while educating children about early concepts in science and math, just to name a few, among basic things like words and colors. I distinctly remember that this is the first time I learned that your eyes dilate when light hits them. The creators of the show had noticed complaints about the lacking nature of educational kids shows in recent times, and set out to create one that would provide the needed resources and concepts to aid both child development and children's early educational lives. Blue's Clues was cleverly crafted to put the education in context, hiding teachable concepts in the daily events taking place in the house. Heavy research was implemented during the creative process, both leading up to and in executing the show, choosing the aesthetic, themes, and method of communication very specifically to what is effective and keeps kids interested. As someone who happens to love shapes and colors, the gentle shapes and colors and papercraft feel to the show makes it feel both welcoming and childlike. The show would officially air in 1996 and would see a huge audience, even being nominated for multiple Emmy Awards in its time. Between 1996 and 2006, the show would put out a total of 143 episodes of the main series, with a spin-off and a reboot having their own sets of episodes both during the run and later down the line respectively. Since Blue's Clues required so much research into what tools were best used to educate children, the early production of the show from concept to finished product took a few years. Within this time, a pilot for the show was produced to help visualize it and act as what could potentially be the final version of the show. After the main pilot made for the show was completed to what the creators had wanted, after around a year's worth of hard work and development, it was shown not only to executives at Nickelodeon, but also to preschoolers, the audience at which the show was aimed. This was done to make sure that the interaction between the host and the characters of the show with the audience worked out to how they'd wanted it, and that it was interactive enough to keep them entertained. The show practically played out in the same way, with Steve, the initial host, exploring the world a step behind Blue at all times, leading the audience along with him. There are only a few notable differences, the biggest one being the naming of the show. This pilot sports a title card that reads Blueprints rather than Blue's Clues. Another difference is the shirt that Steve wears, being a solid red one rather than his iconic striped green one. We know of this pilot only because of a special from 2006 for the show's 10th anniversary that Nickelodeon aired that included clips from the pilot, as well as some concept art where Blue was a cat named Mr. Orange, then Mr. Blue before she changed both species and gender. Queen. It isn't known for sure when the pilot was first seen by people other than the creators, or when it was filmed, with some crew members stating 1995, with others saying it was as far back as 94. There has been no official release of this pilot, nor has anyone been able to locate it in any manner. All we have are the very few clips shown in the anniversary special. On September 10th of 2021, in a way to commemorate the show's 25th anniversary, the official Nick Jr. Twitter posted a video with additional clips from the pilot that include a couple more differences. Blue leaves behind 2 paw prints in one scene instead of only 1 like in the rest of the show's episodes, and Steve's notepad that he uses to record clues doesn't have his iconic thinking chair on its front cover. Some of the scenes from what was shown in this post share similarities with the first public episode of the series, Snack Time, which the pilot was more than likely a rough outline for. Through the airing of the 10th anniversary special, post of this reel, and with an Instagram post by the show's co-creator Angela Santamero where she literally says she has the pilot, it can be deduced that Nickelodeon has this pilot in their possession and doesn't plan on releasing it anytime soon, rather holding it over our heads and teasing us with it in a way.
Way up high in the roly-poly sky is a little round planet of a really nice guy.
There are a few kids shows weirder than Rolie Polie Olie. Rolie Polie Olie is a kids show from 1998 that was created by Nelvana and broadcast on Playhouse Disney in the 2000s that has a cast of little shaped geometric robots. The show follows the titular Olie, a little robot boy, and his younger sister, mother, father, and grandpa, all of whom live in a teapot-like home. They live on a planet that has other robots such as himself, although Olie's best friend does just so happen to be a square robot from another geometry-based planet. The show was designed to have that kind of retro-futuristic aesthetic, like it looks advanced and dated at the same time. Olie and his sister, sometimes with the rest of the family, go on these little adventures and learn life lessons as they do, as this was a show focused on teaching kids the abstract rather than the absolute, when compared to other educational shows like Blue's Clues. The show was also one of the first long-form children's series to be executed in CGI. Not only this, the show even earned 2 TV movies during its lengthy run, and also won both a Gemini Award and an Emmy. The show's creator, William Joyce, was responsible for a lot of the show's conceptualization, including multiple drawings of which the show was based on. If he were to create a show for his characters, he had a specific vision in mind of a nuclear family-esque 1950s optimism for the future type show, revolving around the robots as a family. At first, he didn't want this to happen without close control of what would happen, but later on opened up to a take on the idea in CGI. An agreement would later be made to allow Nelvana to create a pilot in CGI, with Joyce retaining all creative liberty over the project along the way. Created in 1997, this pilot appears to be a lot different from what we ended up getting. 2 screenshots of the pilot itself and 2 pieces of concept art show off a slightly more bright and whimsical retro future setting that reminds me a lot of Meet the Robinsons in particular. A glaring difference is the character designs themselves. Rather than having clothes, or at least rather than having the look of having clothes, the robots seen in the screenshots are completely naked. Well, they're all one color as opposed to the additional color and clothing they were given in the final show. The environment comes across as more plastic and put together than some of the more natural settings in the final show, but also looks a little more bright because of this. I don't know if this is just the photo's quality or if it's intentional, but the pilot looks like it even retains the fuzzy, almost hazy, dreamlike nature of Joyce's art. The pilot is said to follow Olie and his dog around the town as they deliver newspapers, with the city being more like a 50s town than the more space-like Jetsons type town we end up getting. It seems to be that the show might take place more in a town like this, rather than the more gardeny and natural settings that can be found in a very big portion of the show's episodes. I can't confirm or deny this, but from the concept art it looks like the only planned characters were Olie, his parents, and his dog, rather than the extended family that the show would begin with. Not much else is known about this pilot, as it has never been shown to the public. All we have are these few images, and I gotta say, I really like the setting in the pilot much better than what we got, so maybe in the future we can finally get a full look at it.
Guilt.
I love the Muppets. I love everything Muppet related, even the stuff that nobody liked. I eat it up, I don't care. I'm pretty sure I've seen practically every Muppet movie, and while there are some I prefer over others, one of my absolute favorites has been Muppets from Space. Anything with Gonzo lore or development is a win in my book. The movie is a unique one in many ways, being the only Muppet movie not to be a musical, and the first Muppet movie to be centered on the universe of the Muppets, not a retelling or take on a classic story, after Jim Henson's death almost a decade prior. The movie follows Gonzo's attempt at trying to figure out both who and what he is, having always felt and looked different from the other Muppets, more so than some of the other large number of Muppet monsters and oddities. After getting hints that he may be part of some kind of alien race that is attempting to contact him, he and Rizzo get detained by the government because of his pursuit of the aliens, with Kermit and the other Muppets going out to locate and rescue them. As is the norm for a Muppet movie, Muppets from Space is really chock full of fun and celebrity cameos, but it also has a lot of heart and tells a really touching story in my opinion. But before we got the version of the movie that we know and love, well, we sure know it anyway. There was a whole other set of drafts for the movie that show how different it could have been. The Jim Henson Company wanted to make a movie that would be kind of a parody of Star Wars, like they had done on The Muppet Show in the 80s, but also play on the concept of the more Star Trek-like in-universe show on The Muppet Show, Pigs in Space, titling the movie Muppets in Space. One idea for a movie would instead center on Kermit, who gets kidnapped by an alien race mistaking him for their leader, with the other Muppets going to rescue him, kind of like what is seen in the final film. Another less detailed idea was being written out at the same time, Star Gonzo, which featured aliens and Gonzo in some way, with less details known on this draft. The former was chosen as the main influence, with the second worked into it in a few ways, and writers being hired to further it and flesh it out. Muppets in Space was said to be just as heavy on parody as it had promised to be, with writer Jerry Mazzarino's opinion of the project later going on record, whose recollection gives us the best idea of what the plot was originally like. I kinda have to spoil the end of the movie for you to understand the changes made, so I guess if you don't want me to spoil it, you can just move on to the next topic. I'll put a timestamp right here. The conceptualization for the movie must have gone back pretty far, because in an interview with Mazzarino, he says that at some point, the director working on the movie was fired, learning this from a quote, panic call from Henson. I don't know if he means the production company as a whole, or if he actually meant Jim Henson himself. If you know, feel free to correct me. A new director ended up being hired, who completely changed almost everything they'd had before, a sort of mix of the two ideas for the movie to something that played off of both, but watered down the Muppets in Space concept, ditching pretty much everything but the title, leaning more into Star Gonzo and putting the character in the focus. The movie would be stripped of all of its parody, of which had referenced things like Men in Black, Alien, and Contact. Different from the canon ending of Muppets from Space, where it is revealed that Gonzo is an alien, Muppets in Space would end with the audience learning that the aliens mimicked Gonzo's look after having watched episodes of The Muppet Show. The ending of this movie emphasizes that Gonzo is whatever he is, some unique oddity, and although he doesn't have a species he truly belongs to, he has a family in the rest of the Muppet cast. This touching and heartfelt ending message would somewhat remain in the final version, but in much less of an impactful way, as Gonzo is said to be an alien and now has two families to belong to, no longer as confused about his identity or fitting in any sense. Mazzarino would end up leaving the production completely, having disagreed with this major change having been made, and I gotta say I agree with that decision. Some other changes made to the movie lie in its composition. If you thought it was strange that only this movie lacks a musical element to it, you wouldn't be the only one. The movie was initially supposed to have a few songs, a notable one being some kind of reprisal of Gonzo's song in the Muppet movie, I'm Going to Go Back There Someday, which has served as his theme ever since that movie. The song was created for the original version of the movie, but didn't make it in, instead simply being featured on the official Muppets from Space soundtrack. Another song that we know about is Ween's Eye to the Sky, which was reportedly created for the movie before being cut. Not a lot of material has been made public in the way of official scripts or recordings, but there is an available promotional TV spot that contains some scenes that ended up being cut. Again, no full version of the unaltered script has been made public, and it's not sure whether or not it ever will be. But since Disney owns all of that, it's kinda looking like it's never gonna happen.
It's Rocket Power Day, so let's blast off!
Quite possibly the most popular of yellow characters, SpongeBob SquarePants has more than earned his fame, and for the past 24 years, the lovable and almost childlike Sponge from Bikini Bottom has been entertaining kids and grown-ups alike. I love SpongeBob more, particularly the first season, purely because of the art style, not because of the pretentious reasons that everybody else says. Anyways, since he's been around for so long, SpongeBob knows lost and erased content like the back of his four-fingered spongy little hand. 24 years worth of content starts to become a little hard to manage at some point, I would think. I couldn't pick out just one piece of lost media to cover, so I wanted to go through a few briefly. First, we'll start with things that ended up on the cutting room floor. There are literally dozens of cut scenes from SpongeBob, but I just want to cover a couple that are still lost in like a little lightning round of stuff. According to the DVD commentary for Season 1, the season's 14th episode, Karate Choppers, once included a shot of Sandy hitting a fish in between their legs. We don't have any visual proof for this scene, but it was cut because of its inappropriate nature. However, given what did make it into that episode, it sounds like it was a pretty unnecessary shot, and didn't change the narrative by any, so it wasn't some big loss. Similarly, in the third episode of the season, Plankton, Squidward was depicted naked in a shot that was later removed. Kind of a weird move even though Squidward has been seen naked since then. We don't have any public storyboards or visual proof for this one either. I don't quite remember where he would get the opportunity to be naked in the first place other than being in his house, but that just kinda seems really out of character. You might know from Tom Kenny himself that the 18th episode of Season 2, Sailor Mouth, may possibly still have a saved cut of the audio with the actual swear words included somewhere in Nickelodeon's archives. But there was actually a piece of dialogue that made it past this editing and into the early version of the episode before being cut. Although the swear words are still covered up by the sound of a dolphin chirping like the rest of the episode, there was once an exchange where SpongeBob tells Patrick, "Go F yourself," with Patrick telling him, "F you too." According to Season 2's DVD commentary, the lines ended up being cut, because they were too inappropriate for kids. It might be because the phrases were still too easily decipherable and were more vulgar and mean-sounding because of this, even with the dolphin noise added in. The 14th episode of Season 2, Welcome to the Chum Bucket, originally had a shot of Plankton actually removing SpongeBob's brain from his body to be put in the SpongeBob robot, but according to the commentary on the Season 2 DVD, it was cut, possibly due to its more graphic than normal nature. Finally, in Season 3's 5th episode, Doing Time, Tom Kenny is listed in the credits as having played Mrs. Puff's dad, but this character never appears in the show, let alone this single episode. The public hasn't ever been told about what went on behind the scenes with this character, so the only evidence we have is this simple credit. Since the credit even made its way into the episode, it's most likely that Tom Kenny had recorded the lines already, and the scene including the character was cut at the last minute. A Day with SpongeBob SquarePants is not real. SpongeBob also has some lost media regarding its pilot and early concept. Before SpongeBob was named what he is, he was almost called SpongeBoy instead, with the show being called SpongeBoy Ahoy, before creators found out that the SpongeBoy name was already in use by another unknown product. He looked even spoinklier in the concept art this early on, I just thought I would share that. The pilot was entirely recorded with the SpongeBoy name before the change had to be made, but this audio cannot be found anywhere, with only a few storyboards proving that the SpongeBoy name made it that far into the pilot's development. The original pilot made in 1997 also has a different opening sequence and end credit sequence, and can be found online pretty easily.
I'm ready! I'm ready! I'm ready!
SpongeBob SquarePants!
For 2 years in a row in both 2000 and 2001, Nickelodeon ran a block of programming, the Nicktoons Summer Splash. for the afternoons of the summer months of mid-July to late August, that aired episodes of some of the channel's more popular Nicktoons at the time. The block would initially air a 3-hour-long marathon for each show to air on their own day, then 6 hours for the last week, 5 days a week, rotating between Rugrats on Monday, Rocket Power on Tuesday, The Wild Thornberrys on Wednesday, Hey Arnold on Thursday, and Rocko's Modern Life on Friday, which would later be replaced by Cat Dog within a few weeks of the block's initial airing in July of 2001. The block would be hosted by the most popular face on the channel, SpongeBob, alongside Patrick, Sandy, and Squidward. They would appear in interstitials between episodes of programming, as well as at the end and beginning of each block. Nicktoons Summer Splash was later retooled as Nicktoons Summer Beach House, starting in 2002. This version would end up replacing all of these bumpers, but when the block was altered once again back to Nicktoons Summer Splash, now with 12-hour-long stretches of marathons, new bumpers were created and the old ones were nowhere to be found. We have a few ideas of what kinds of bumpers exist, based on preserved recordings of the block, which show various introductory bumpers for each show, as well as non-specific bumpers simply featuring the characters, and some that even have allusions to the Lost Astrology with Squidward shorts, which aired during one of the 2 first Nicktoons Summer Splashes. There are collections of these bumpers online, but it's nowhere near all of them.
Oobi, you friends!
Puppetry is an art that I feel never gets enough respect. Just as Jim Henson feared for his own creations, the art of being a puppeteer is often overlooked and seen as a way of storytelling only for children. Well, this entry does just so happen to be a kids show, but it was groundbreaking for many reasons. After puppeteer Josh Selig observed a puppeteer training technique where students would position 2 ping pong balls with eyes drawn on and tied together with a string between their fingers to make it appear as though their hands had eyes. This strange method of creating a puppet did not go unnoticed by Selig. He wanted to make something bigger out of it. He would later pitch the show Peepo to the newly created Noggin cable channel, and the channel would later pick up the show, renamed to Oobi because of copyright issues. Oobi would follow the lives of Oobi, a young boy, Uma, his little sister, Grandpoo, their grandpa, and their friend Keiko, all of which were portrayed by the hands of the puppeteers hired for the show, one of which was, again, Noel McNeil. The show would teach preschool kids the basics of life, such as word formation and identifying shapes and colors, among other things. Doing so using very minimal speech and relying on sentences that were at most times only 1 word long and repeated to hammer in the concept. Noggin gave Oobi a first season comprised of 48 shorts to play between other shows, which would be anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes long. This season would air in 2000, and the series would later on get a second season of 26 episodes, now reformatted into 2 13-minute long stories, and a third season structured the exact same way, for a total of 48 more longer 13-minute segments. Oobi would go on to be a beloved show and fever dream for kids my age who only remember it just enough for it to be in the back of their minds, unsure if it was actually real until being informed that it was in fact horrifyingly real. Oobi saw amazing ratings which allowed the series to go on for quite a long time for an educational kids show, and even won a few awards for being a heavily influential show for children. The show would also bring up Noggin's ratings and reputation as a good educational channel for preschool-aged children, and the success of the show would allow the production company behind it, Little Airplane Productions, to go on and create another show for the channel, the equally beloved Wonder Pets. Oobi's second and third season can be viewed on Nickelodeon's dedicated Noggin streaming service, which I would buy because it just makes it so much easier to take nostalgia trips. However, the first season of shorts has never gotten an official release like this. A few of them were included on DVD releases, however, they were even shorter cuts of the original shorts, for some reason. Out of all 48 shorts, almost all have been recovered, save for the first short Dance, which is missing its ending, the 22nd short Puppy, and the 24th short Slide. The latter 2 are completely missing, with no recordings having been located thus far. The only proof we have to back them up is a few screenshots, but it is a good sign that so many of the 48 shorts have been found, so it might just be a matter of time before these 2 are located off the tapings.
It's been nice working with you, Gurr. Now self-destruct. Finally!
Doing a full 180 here. When you picture a kids show, you most likely have something bright and fun in mind, and not a dark, gritty, stylized show featuring a power-hungry alien bent on enslaving humanity. In the early 2000s, pretty much every network was aiming to add some variety to their content in an effort to gain the attention of an older, more teen demographic. Much like Michael Eisner sought out more thrilling rides at the Disney parks for the same reason, Nickelodeon reached out to Jonan Vasquez, a comic creator known for his macabre comics, and asked him to pitch an idea for a show aimed towards older kids, taking advantage of his dark comedic style. He would go on rather quickly to pitch Invaderism, a story about an alien aiming to impress the higher-ups of his species by conquering an Earth Earth-like planet, proving that he is capable of what it takes to be an invader. Alongside his personal robot Gur, who has become a mascot for scene kids, Zim gets into trouble in practically every episode, having to blend in as a normal kid, all the while being constantly questioned by Dib, a human boy who pretty much knows he is an alien and is absolutely convinced that something is off about him, aiming to get him discovered and ruin his plans. The pilot would end up having the same plot as the pitch, which would most importantly feature a food fight in Dib and Zim's school where they face off against each other primarily due to the animosity between them, even from the get-go, with Zim not very secretive about the alien technology he has, always finding a way to excuse it or explain it to be more reasonable for a normal boy to have. As we know now, the show is fully animated in 2D, with occasional CGI elements in the show's opening and sometimes in the show itself, I believe. But when the show was pitched to Nickelodeon and a test pilot was ordered to be made, there was a larger scene than normal that was fully 3D animated. The official pitch pilot and show pilot have been made completely accessible, but upon finding screenshots of the food fight scene in 3D graphics, questions began to pop up about where this particular test was. Fans even got the chance to ask crew members of the show about this test in 2004, but nobody could provide any solid answers about it or release it, not saying anything about it other than that it existed and that they would try to find it in a form that was reasonable enough to share with the public. Invader Zim is known for its dark and moody setting, and the kind of humor that goes along with it. A lot of the episodes have extremely gross and unsettling moments, and even sometimes entire plots that border on that of a horror movie. Somewhat due to the dark nature of the show, mixed with declining rates into the end of its first season and beginning of its second one, Invader Zim was cancelled in the middle of its second season, which wouldn't be the first or last time a show got cut mid-run. Between its first and second season, which was cut short and didn't finish production, there are 28 complete episodes. Since Invader Zim wouldn't be given a proper chance to wrap up due to its being cancelled, the show has quite a few episodes that got deep into planning, of course with the intention of producing and airing them. The episodes vary in terms of completion, with some only having come as far as brainstorming, with others being finished as far as the audio being recorded. None of these episodes have had an official release, and none of the storyboards that have been found are considered to be final or official, as they were made based off of what is available of the official scripts. But there is plenty of material that is available to kind of scratch the itch of what the rest of the season may have looked like. Some of the scripts for the unproduced episodes were read at the Invader Zim convention InvaderCon, namely the episode's Day of the Spookies, which has a storyboard sort of scrapped together from what was described in the script, and the episode The Trial, which also has a similar storyboard. About 7 full episodes were at the very least outlined, with 15 stories having been detailed in some way, by anything ranging from word of mouth to the official script being released. For example, there are 4 unnumbered brainstorms of episodes that never got any material made for them, outside of written outlines. It's really interesting to look at, and I can't possibly talk about every planned episode, as they all have varying amounts of material for them. So if you are interested in seeing what is currently a complete list, I will link the Lost Media Wiki entry in the description. This piece of Lost Media is actually really personal to me, more so than the other entries, and while it isn't still lost, I wanted to talk about it because the fact that it was lost for a time means I literally saw it right before it went missing, and I can't say that about many other pieces of Lost Media on this list. Or at all. I've been a huge Digimon fan for about as long as I can remember. I think I was in about 4th grade when I watched the original 1999 series, and I've been obsessed ever since. I even used to watch the first Digimon movie so much that I was able to quote it word for word at some point in my life. I haven't seen every season or series, or however you want to classify them, but I did end up watching the 4th season Digimon Frontier, and I fell in love with it just as much as I had with the original series. If you aren't familiar with Digimon, or you discount Digimon as being a knockoff of Pokemon, let me educate you on it. Digimon is a franchise that has put out numerous virtual toys, games, and visual media. Starting out as a Tamagotchi-esque toy, playing off of the concept of battling monsters, Digimon has inflated into a franchise almost as big as Pokemon itself, and actually put out a show that did better ratings than Pokemon's series for a time. This anime series based on the show follows a group of kids in the digital world, where digital monsters native to this world roam. They befriend them and become their companions, with the goal being getting the kids out of the digital world and safely back home. Since the main characters change with pretty much each entry, and each entry plays on sort of a new, different concept to the show, pretty much none of them are connected, and you don't need to have seen the first 3 seasons to understand Season 4. Season 4, or Digimon Frontier, follows a more reduced cast of 5 main kids as opposed to classic Digimon's 7 main characters. A more modern telling of the Digimon story, this season connects the real world to the digital world by way of actual real-life technology, namely phones. Airing in Japan between April of 2002 and March of 2003, the show follows Takuya, Koji, Zoe, JP, and Tommy, after they all receive texts beckoning them onto a train that ends up bringing them to the digital world. Your typical Chosen One storyline ensues, with the main difference of the series being that the kids themselves can morph into Digimon, rather than having one as their own companion, even though they do end up with a couple of actual Digimon as their friends and guides in the digital world. As I mentioned before, I watched the first Digimon movie, but this suggests another. Digimon pretty much produced a movie or extended length special for each series of the show, up until season 4, I believe. The movies are usually separated from the main series content, so you don't need to know anything about Digimon to watch any of the movies. Digimon Frontier got its own movie, and later on Digimon Frontier would also get an English dub to be aired in a slightly different time span between September 2002 and July 2003 in North America, eventually including this movie airing on Jetix in 2005. I watched this movie with my sister sometime in 2015 or maybe 16 on the most impossibly small smartphone, bootlegged on YouTube. It was easy to find a simple search on the platform and boom, it was right there in full, but I never knew that sometime after this it must have been taken down, because a Reddit user made a post about having searched for it for 2 years prior to the post with no luck. The movie called Island of Lost Digimon was at one time pretty much nowhere to be found dubbed. The dub was produced by Disney, and since the copy I remember watching was from Jetix, it's more than likely Disney issued a takedown of this copy sometime after I had watched it, luckily. But unfortunately for this person, it was too late. They were able to locate low-quality subbed versions on outside websites, and Hulu had once carried Frontier but not the movie. They also recall having watched the dub on YouTube prior to it being taken down, but found alternate versions in pieces and in terrible quality from other users on YouTube.
What's inside?
I kind of didn't even want to talk about this one because of the rocky history it has in terms of the community, as well as the fact that so many other more popular YouTubers have done actual dedicated searches rather than just sitting and writing about what's readily available. But when I watched said videos, it interested me so much that I always wanted to give my own take on it, even before I was genuinely investing myself in making videos. The Backyardigans has gained such an immense popularity in this time, with kids recalling it as one of the most fun and nostalgic shows of their childhood. The Backyardigans follows a group of lovable animals who all live on the same block, coming together to play every day in their backyard, taking advantage of their wild imaginations to go on limitless adventures, teaching kids how to use their imaginations in a similar way. The 5 characters, Pablo, Tyrone, Uniqua, Austin, and Tasha, would go on to become symbols of a carefree and adventurous childhood, and have stuck with kids my age for pretty much their whole lives. The show was 3D animated as the medium was becoming more and more popular for television series to use in the late 90s and into the 2000s. The structure of the show would follow the kids on their adventures, with some sort of problem arising that needed to be solved, and would most times include a song on top of the already included closing song at the end of the show. However, the show didn't always have the charm or palatable appearance that we ended up with. What you're looking at is a very short clip of a pilot made at Nickelodeon Studios Florida for a show called Me and My Friends. The now defunct Nickelodeon Studios Florida once showed a compilation of clips of the most memorable of Nickelodeon's content that was produced there to celebrate the studio's 10th anniversary. I'm gonna make a separate video about the entire history of and controversy behind Nickelodeon Studios Florida and the Nickelodeon Resort in the future, so I won't get too detailed about it now, even though I kind of want to keep rambling about it. As is important to this topic though, a few other live-action kids shows will be filmed here prior to Me and My Friends, namely Eureka's Castle and Gullah Gullah Island. Me and My Friends played off of the same theme as the two, using full-body puppets as the main cast. From even these few seconds worth of footage, we can tell that Pablo, Uniqua, and Tyrone were not always meant to be computer generated. There are very notable differences between the look of the characters here versus what we ended up getting in the retooled show. As the search for this pilot persisted, more and more still images from the pilot's production would be both uncovered and directly provided by cast and crew members who worked on the show. From these images and recollections from these individuals, we gathered a lot of information about the pilot, if not the pilot itself, which honestly I could live with, knowing that these people had fun making it and can still recall it this many years later. As seen in the short clip, these costumes have the strange ability to blink, and a cast member later revealed that these were animatronic heads, such as those used for other full-body puppets in Labyrinth and Dumbo Circus, to give a few examples. These pictures revealed a bigger, more complete picture of the cast and the pilot of the proposed show, although the latter is more speculative than anything. However, it did give us more solid differences between the two projects, with images now showing Tasha as well as a group of scrapped meerkat characters in the form of hand-controlled puppets. The most glaring differences in character design include Uniqua's having nostrils and a tail, being even weirder of a creature, as well as both Tyrone and Tasha's nostrils being a darker and more jarring black. The clothing on some of the characters is also a little different, with minor coloring alterations made between this and the CGI version. Pablo's hat is yellow instead of red, and Tyrone's shirt is striped with yellow and blue, rather than the finalized red and blue. Tasha also wears a bow on her head in addition to her clothes. And in this version of the character, Uniqua doesn't wear any clothes at all. Let me know what you think Uniqua is. I have an unpopular opinion because people hate to think abstractly when it comes to kids shows, but I don't think she's any specific thing, hence the name Uniqua, like unique. She's something completely unique. Anyway, this pilot ended up getting rejected in favor of Dora the Explorer, and it wouldn't get any official release and still hasn't even now, after all of this searching has been done for it. If you want a more detailed recollection of the search, the YouTuber Sewer Reviewer pretty much headed up documenting both his and others' effort to find it on the YouTube end of things, so I highly recommend checking that out for yourself because it's super interesting to see how far it's come along. Before we leave this topic though, there is the second pilot I haven't seen being talked about as much as its failure of a sister. This is one for the version of the show that we ended up getting, the CGI show The Backyardigans. Even less is known about this pilot as the interest in Me and My Friends has, in my opinion, overshadowed it. Because this pilot was most likely the first, most reasonable bridge between the live-action Me and My Friends and the 3D animated Backyardigans, there are a lot of similarities between this pilot and what can be seen in Me and My Friends. From the screenshots we do have, only 3 of the characters can be seen, similarly to what was at first observed in the clip of Me and My Friends. The pilot features Pablo, Uniqua, and Tyrone, who look more like their final selves, but also have remnants of their live-action counterparts. Uniqua still retains her nostrils at this point, and the wiki says that both Tyrone and Pablo have lighter colors, but in my opinion it just looks like the unfinished lighting is making them look lighter than normal in some shots. We also have a piece of 2D concept art that does show Tasha, but I think this was also made much closer to the end of Me and My Friend's life, given that Tasha still has a bow on her head and Uniqua has no nostrils but still has a tail, whereas in the actual pilot screenshots, she can't be seen with one. A promotional clip for Nick Jr. showed exactly 1 second of this pilot, which looks so much more rough in nature than the finalized version, making it easy for fans to spot as being the pilot. A film reel from one of the artists who worked on the show has an additional clip of it, and there is also a compilation of available clips on YouTube, but no more of this pilot has ever been deliberately released. Nor has it been sought out as much as Me and My Friends. Hopefully the search for Me and My Friends will spur someone to graciously release this as well, or maybe more people will become more interested in the CGI pilot if Me and My Friends does eventually get found or released.
Jack, you don't have much time. We have to leave soon for waffle making class.
I haven't talked too much about puppet shows on the channel so far, but I am really interested in them. I developed a love for puppetry after having been scared of puppets for a while, and now I think they're infinitely interesting, which is why I made a point to include as much puppetry on this list as possible. Jack's Big Music Show is a children's puppet show following Jack, a young boy who loves music, his best friend Mary, and his dog Mel, who both share his love for music, with the 3 playing music together in Jack's clubhouse. The show is educational in nature, teaching kids about the basics of music, as well as building imaginative skills in children and teaching them that in getting along together, beautiful things like music itself can be created. The show also sometimes features other human musical guests. Much like many of the other shows on this list, Jack's Big Music Show has a pilot that hasn't been released to the public, but somewhat uniquely it also has no available material or clips of it, and the only proof we have of its existence is based on the recollection of singers and voice actors who helped out with the pilot. Because so little is known about this pilot, this section will be rather short, and it also means that it is unknown what differences there were between the pilot and the final show. All we know is that it was made at some point, and that's about it. Personally, this is one of my most sought after pieces of lost media, purely because it's a show I'm very nostalgic for. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a super big search conducted for it, but if there ever was in the future, I would love to get involved.
Bear, scientists say it's physically impossible to keep your eyes open when you do it. When you do what?
Watch C-SPAN.
I actually never did watch Bear in the Big Blue House more than a couple times, but regardless, it's something that stuck with me, because it's just so cute and charming. It's a classic show that raised a lot of kids. Between 1997 and 2006, Playhouse Disney, when it was a block and not a channel, aired Bear in the Big Blue House, a children's puppet show whose main character was the titular bear, who lived in his titular Big Blue House, alongside other much smaller puppet friends. Produced by the Jim Henson Company, the show would mainly use a life-size full-body puppet as the main character, with supporting characters in the form of hand puppets and otherwise edited-in characters for the sun and moon. Aimed towards young children, Bear would serve as a gracious and kind host, inviting the audience into his home, and into the shenanigans that would play out during the day. Performed by Noel McNeil, you love to see it, Bear would be a fatherly figure to his friends and his viewers, teaching children the basics of being a kind human, getting along with others, and forming strong relationships and the life and social skills needed to do so. The show was hailed by many parents for its gentle tone and educational nature, much different from some of the more brain-rotting, annoying kids shows at the time. It went on to win a few Emmys, as well as a couple Parents' Choice Awards. Bear in the Big Blue House would receive 118 episodes in its run, with one of those being a special, but these episodes would only air regularly between 1997 to early 2003 and stagnate later in 2003. The rest of the show's created episodes would be slowly aired at a much slower rate in 2006, as the show had been slowly and quietly cancelled because the rights had traded hands from the Jim Henson Company to Disney, and possibly also because the actress who played Luna the Moon on the show, Lynn Thigpen, had passed away prior to this 3-year time span. In 2005, Disney aired a series of shorts that served as a spin-off of the main series to keep fans interested during the show's lengthy official hiatus. Titled Breakfast with Bear, these shorts would have Bear come into the homes of real kids, rather than the kids being welcomed into Bear's home. The kids would detail their morning routine to Bear, and he would assist them in the process of getting ready to start the day. Of the 20 shorts made, only 6 have been found, and 1 is currently partially found, with the other 13 being fully lost. There are a good handful of screenshots from these shorts online, as well as numerous recollections of the shorts from fans. Summaries for the first 5 shorts have been provided, and there are cut clips of the shorts that were included in Playhouse Disney promos. A few of the songs from the shorts have been officially released, but this is about it, as the shorts themselves haven't gotten the same treatment. The only hope we have for finding these is by searching through tapings of the Playhouse Disney block. Even if you weren't necessarily a religious person, there was still something to enjoy about VeggieTales. Maybe you just liked the idea of talking vegetables. I know I did, because I don't think I was ever really conscious of the religious nature of the show until I was probably too old to even be watching it anymore. Regardless of the fact of it having a religious undertone and teaching to it, VeggieTales has reached a very high status among kids of all backgrounds and ages, making it one of the most popular pieces of religious children's programming, if not the most. The show follows Bob, a tomato, and Larry, a cucumber, among other vegetables and fruits, retelling the stories of the Bible and making them more palatable and applicable to everyday life. VeggieTales paints Christianity in a light of being unifying, teaching kids that just being a good human should be the goal of religious beliefs. I don't condone religious pandering, by the way. I'm not jumping on here and glorifying Christianity or any religion for that matter. That's just how I've seen VeggieTales be described and how I would personally agree to the description of it. Since the show's creation in 1993 as a direct-to-DVD series, VeggieTales has seen official broadcasts of the show, multiple DVD and theater movies, books, CDs, video games, and even reboots made by bigger companies, namely NBC Universal after they bought out the show's producer Big Idea Entertainment. Such a success means that the franchise has been around for 20 years, and it also means that there's at least some kind of lost media regarding it. Like I mentioned before, VeggieTales did get a couple of movies that were actually released in theaters, namely 2002's Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, which is an obviously religious movie, and the much less religious movie, The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything from 2008. If you watch VeggieTales for the less religious, more humor-centric skits, this is definitely the movie for you. Rock Lobster parody. However, the gap between these two movies wasn't always meant to be so big, as Big Idea had another movie in their plans before their unfortunate brush with bankruptcy in 2003. The movie would come out in 2005, directly in the middle of these two movies, and would build on the lore of the lovable talking vegetables, primarily Bob and Larry, hence the movie's title, The Bob and Larry Movie. The movie would show the audience how Bob and Larry met, and would even feature human characters to further confuse the strange universe VeggieTales takes place in. Since Big Idea was still a fairly small company at the time, with only about 10 people working on this movie before it was eventually cancelled, they decided instead to push the Pirates movie, pivoting to focus on that while still working on the Bob and Larry movie should they get the chance to produce it in the future. Well, unfortunately, the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything was pretty much a failure, only ending up making back about $13 million of its $15 million budget, which would have been more like $21 million in 2023. No footage of the movie has currently been made public, and only some images and concept art of the script have been both leaked online and directly uploaded by the crew members. Phil Vischer, the founder of Big Idea and the creator of VeggieTales, has confirmed that he still does have a copy of the full script for the movie, but can't release it due to NBC Universal now owning all materials relating to VeggieTales. As of late, Universal has publicly talked about VeggieTales possibly having another theatrical movie, but it has been confirmed that any such movie would not be the Bob and Larry movie. Since I know from personal experience that the fist of NBC Universal is a tight one, there probably isn't any hope for the script to get released, but there could be a chance that some character models and artwork produced for the movie could get leaked by artists who worked on the movie, as we've seen with multiple artists' animation reels in the past. People who collect, save, or search out lost media know the importance of interstitial programming. It's cleverly built to give a block on a channel a theme, continue the vibe between shows, and direct you to where the programming is heading next. A lot of people see interstitial programming as inconsequential, about as important as any other commercial or simple bumper, but like both commercials and bumpers, a lot of love, hard work, and care gets put into creating these mini shows. In 2005, with the help of a good fistful of companies, PBS Kids Sprout, which is now just referred to as Sprout, began broadcasting. Along with the launch of the channel was the premiere of The Good Night Show, which acted as the name for both a block on the channel itself and the interstitial show featured in this block. This block would run on the channel from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. in an effort to occupy the market on late-night children's programming, as the block's competitor Noggin didn't play any late-night shows at the time. The goal of the block would be to ease kids into their nighttime routine, sort of help them wind down, with the overall vibe of the Good Night Show being calming. The concepts and activities of the show included things such as singing songs and doing crafts, led by the host through numerous sections of the show, even including a showcase of art that the young audience, dubbed Sproutlings, would send in. Some animated segments would be worked in, but the main stars of the show were always the host and their pet fish Hush. But later on, Nina, one of the hosts, would also have a puppet companion star, a hand puppet shaped like a star. And oh yeah, Noel McNeil was the host in the early episodes of the show. The Good Night Show would rotate through hosts over the years, with the most memorable and long-staying host being the aforementioned Nina. The block would have numerous episodes produced for it, and the block itself would be able to play twice a night during its run. Starting around 2016 and mostly being executed in 2017, the show was cancelled, most likely to coincide with the channel's rebranding into what it is now, Universal Kids. In the past, the episodes featuring hosts that ended up being replaced were lost due to their brief stints not getting many or if any home releases. Nina's run, on the other hand, was much longer, and lasted from the third season into and through the show's end. Only a few of the episodes of the block were released on DVD, whereas a lot more were put onto Google Play for purchase at a time, and uploaded onto the PBS Kids Sprout YouTube channel, whose videos on this have since been privated. What now serves as NBC's Kids YouTube channel, Peacock Jr., used to have some of these episodes, but now no longer carries them, and the Sprout Online website that once hosted him has gone defunct since the rebrand. Due to the weird time frame in which the show was on, it's not as likely that people would have full recordings of the show, as it is meant to be watched before bed, but it could be possible that if parents deliberately recorded this block to show their kids earlier in the day, there could be a chance of those kinds of recordings popping up. That might be the only chance we have at finding some of these episodes. I want to even say that this show is the most lost show I've talked about in this video. A few loose clips have been uploaded to YouTube, but that's about it, with no full episodes available as readily as they once were.
I can help 2. I can help 3.
Handy Manny is a show I feel has enough acclaim to it where I don't really have to explain it, but I will anyway. Handy Manny is a children's show created by Nelvana that features a handyman and his set of talking tools, who help him repair things around the town he lives in. The members of Manny's community come to him to repair anything they notice is broken, or have broken themselves, with each episode focusing on 2 stories where Manny does so, most times leaving his workshop, other times not having to go too far. The show promotes problem solving, mostly expressed by the tools themselves, each with a different function. They suggest the best ways to fix a thing based on their own perspectives and what they can do, and usually it ends up with them working together in some kind of combination to solve the issue at hand and fix what's broken. Between 2006 and 2013, across 3 seasons, Handy Manny received a total of 113 episodes, which makes it one of the longer Disney kids shows. The show has roots in bilinguality, with Manny himself and his tools speaking Spanish, as well as some of the other residents of his town speaking it in conversation with him. The show doesn't necessarily have the singular goal to teach children Spanish as a main objective like Dora the Explorer might, rather just using it in the context of topics that are already understandable because of the subject of a conversation, kind of throwing in that educational element as a nice bonus. Anyway, once again, this show is one that suffers from having a lost pilot disease. Can we make that a term, please? In Handy Manny's case, the trial run on the animation was the reasoning behind creating an 11-minute pilot, which would be animated by DKP Productions, now Jamfil Toronto, rather than Nelvana, as this would have been before they picked up the series. From a few available screenshots, an early promotional image of Manny, and even earlier concept art, and from a DKP film reel containing small clips of the pilot, we get a pretty good idea of what the show could have looked like at this stage of production. The best way I can describe this pilot is that it's just downright scary. The staple, bright, warm colors of the final show aren't present in this version, and the tools look more like the creatures of a nightmare rather than Manny's friends, with tiny, horrified-looking eyes that have these beady little pupils. It's awful. Other than the tools, the human characters all look relatively okay, if not a little bit scrunklier than normal. Crew members who worked on the show have confirmed a few details that set this pilot apart from the final show, that the sets featured in the show would be less elaborate, and that Manny worked from home rather than having his own dedicated store, and the character Mr. Lopart, who owns a candy store beside Manny's repair shop, would have instead been Manny's neighbor, confirming that the character was planned from pretty much the beginning. The current 3D side-scroll platforming versions of Super Mario have been a hit for years, and hailed as a great take on the original completely 2D games. And since 2006's new Super Mario Bros., we've gotten multiple entries to these, including the ever-popular Mario Maker games. I wanted to take a look at the one that started it all, New Super Mario Bros. For the DS, as I had the later installment for the Wii growing up. These takes on the game are really nostalgic for me, so that's why I chose the original as one of the few video games I was planning to talk about in the video. This game has multiple lost builds, starting as early as 2004, with the first build being shown at E3 that year. This build was very early in the game's development, lacking in HUD and music, and having both a couple of strange player movements and environment pieces. Mario was able to be seen doing backflips, a form of movement that isn't present in the final version. But notably you are able to do flips if you do the triple jump stride thing as you move along. The game calls it a triple jump, even though that's not really how I would describe it. The artwork for the background set Mario in much different environments than what made it into the final game, looking even more cartoon-like in nature, being a little bit more flat as opposed to the soft and rounded shapes present in the released game. Some levels of the build were even set at different times of the day, which is pretty cool in my opinion. We have a handful of screenshots showing off different levels being explored by a Mega Mario. A writer for Nintendo World Report recalled what he observed in a video of the gameplay, sharing mostly the same details as what others have, and what can be seen in the screenshots, but also adding that Bowser was able to be seen seemingly running through a level much like Mario himself could, suggesting both that Bowser would have been given some new gameplay elements unique to this entry, and that this writer was shown a video that was different from what the public was shown. The game wouldn't be released that year and would make it to another E3 the next year in 2005. Another build would be shown at this convention, having a lot of differences from the first build, being more complete and even having a playable demo available. This version still had fairly different graphics, and even the title card, which would be shown off for the first time at this E3, was much different from the final version. This version also appeared to have a two-player version closer to the one that made it into the Wii entry. There are also other possible builds for the game that come from different sources, but since they were not shown as widely as the E3 ones were, their existence cannot really be confirmed because they can't necessarily be set apart from or directly tied to the other known builds. In 2006, closer to the game's official release, a final build would be shown at E3, which is much closer to the final game, with very minor changes being made between this build and the final version. There are multiple screenshots and a few videos of this build, and one of these videos, located from an unknown website, has all of the music intact but lacks the iconic punch to the beats where every enemy has to stop and dance, though it does still have the musical cues for it. For some reason, even this minor difference makes this version of the game feel so empty and feelingless, like, it doesn't even feel like a Mario game. Anyways, none of these builds have ever been made public, and since Nintendo has historically been very secretive of and protective over their builds for some reason, it's probably likely we won't get an official release, or any official material or word being provided on it, especially since it's been such a long time.
But the best part of Coachella was all the new friends I made.
Do me a favor, would you hold my foot?
This is gross!
Yo Gabba Gabba is an educational show aimed at preschool-aged kids with the goal of teaching them social and life skills ahead of going to school and doing more interacting with kids. The show is hosted by DJ Lance Rock, a DJ who has 5 figurines who come to life every day, with each episode being a new day. The 5 toys, Muno, Fufa, Plex, Broby, and Tootie, interact with one another, with Lance acting as sort of their caretaker, guiding them through any arguments or issues they end up having. The show has both musical and animated segments, and the toys themselves are played by actors in costumes, and later dubbed over by voice actors. The show has amassed a huge following, and it's still very popular with kids nowadays. I want to make a video about Yo Gabba Gabba on its own in the future because there's just so much history to it and a lot of love and care went into it that I want to explore in more depth. The show aired in 2007, but prior to this, a very rough pitch demo had to be made for the show to get picked up and given a bigger budget to produce an entire show. This test demo is one of the most unsettling, off-putting things I've seen in my life. I love it. Created by literally the MC Bat commander of the Aquabats, who I will also do a video on, 3 characters were utilized in this demo, 2 of which were original creations prior to the demo's creation, the Cyclopsis and Weedy the Broccoli Bee, and a 3rd unnamed basic robot made specifically for it. The Cyclopsis would later become Muno, and Weedy the Broccoli Bee would become Broby for the demo, which his name would reflect as an homage to the original. The robot would later undergo a lot of changes and turn into Plex, at least it's suggested by the look of Plex when compared to this robot. The demo uses really crude costumes and some animation, but it definitely has that wacky and weird charm that the Aquabat stuff always has. It puts your mind in such a weird place, it feels like an alien or some kind of AI made a kids show to communicate with humanity. It's great. This demo notably has a version of a song featured in the first episode, Eat, and is strangely named Yo Gabba, just one Gabba. It doesn't really have the same oomph to it, does it? This demo was lost for a long time, but as of now, it is currently up on the Internet Archive. Once the show got past the demo stage, 2 pilots were made. While the demo was made sometime roughly in the early 2000s, these pilots do have a solid date of 2006, a year prior to the show's actual premiere. These 2 pilots cannot really be separated from one another based on solely the images and information we have available, but that being said, there is stuff we do know about the pilots in general as opposed to the final show. The first most obvious difference is aesthetic, the actual look of the toy characters themselves. Tootie and Broby look practically exactly the same. I want to say that Broby might be a little less saturated in color, but it might just be the lighting, so I can't come to a conclusion based on this image alone. The other 3 characters have differences in their costumes, albeit small ones. Muno's teeth are more pointy than the finalized round version, possibly because there is an episode where he bites people, so him having sharp teeth would make that plot more sinister, and giving him more blunt teeth would instead make him look less threatening. The antenna on Plex's head is blue rather than the normal red, and there isn't much difference about him other than that, so I hope that this was an easy fix and they didn't have to make a whole new costume. However, Fufa is the strangest case of all. We have a group of production images showing the 5 characters at the same time as the pilot was shot, but even though everyone else looks rather finalized, Fufa just looks terrible. Instead of a matte or shiny finish seen on the other characters, she instead looks to be covered in a more velvety fabric, making her skin look splotchy, like crushed velvet looks. Other than this weird detail, she looks more lumpy overall, with her proportions not being as clear or streamlined as the others. The best way I can describe it is that she has too much of a neck, like the final version doesn't have one at all, but this one does, and it makes her face look like it's up way too high. This costume looks more like something that would have been used in the demo. We do also have an image of the show's title card, which is different from the final one. I'll show them side by side for a second, you can pause if you need to. The only other thing we have from this pilot is the title card for the first episode, and it's rather lackluster compared to official ones. It doesn't even actually display the name of the episode, so this might have even just been a placeholder, and there would have been a different final title card. A few clips of the pilot are available online. I'll just go through them in order of how they appear on the wiki. First off, we have the pilot's version of the show's opening, which does have some differences from the official one. Not only does the superimposition of the characters look slightly more janky than normal, the theme song itself is actually different, lacking the children's voices that can normally be heard. I can't play it, but I will say that the openings left without any singing is kind of eerie and makes the environment feel even more sterile, being set in a white background, being set in a white void, occupied only by the characters. The second clip is a hand recording of a screen showing one of the pilots. I don't think they were ever broadcast, so I'm not sure where this screen is or how the person recorded it, but I guess it's a win anyway. The clip in question features the dance segment of the show, which usually brings on a guest star to dance with the characters. Given that this is a pilot, the guest isn't as exciting as, say, Tony Hawk or Frodo Baggins, but it is someone I would say is equally iconic on his own merit, Julius the Monkey. You've seen this guy. This is the whole segment, so it is possible that this is a copy of the clip sent to Paul Frank's offices or something, and an employee or something like that recorded it and uploaded it. Nobody can ask, as the comments on the video are turned off and there is no context or information in the description either. The final clip is a segment featured in a few other episodes of the show titled La La Doodles, featuring a mixture of papercraft and stop-motion animation with objects, with digital drawings added in over it. It's really artsy and, in my opinion, retains some of the feeling that the test demo had because of its appearance and method of animation. As far as I know, there have been no official releases of either pilot, and any search efforts are pretty private if there are any. Like with most pilots, especially in Nickelodeon's case, these are probably being held onto pretty well for whatever reason. I love talking about junk you've definitely never ever heard of in your life. I guarantee you that a very, very small portion of the population has seen the show, let alone remembers it. I am one of these people. I probably account for 20% of these people. Monster Buster Club is your average tweens hanging out but for a reason type show. I am sure there was a better way to say that, but moving along. It follows 4 young kids, Chris, Sam, Danny, and Kathy, as they fight various aliens and monsters attracted to their town, under the name of the Monster Buster Club, a collective formed eons before the events of the show. The show is a balance of sci-fi and like a school aesthetic, I guess, I don't know. It's got a Spider-Man thing going on about it, with the kids balancing their own lives at school with their lives as alien-busting superheroes. You don't have to know everything about the show to understand the episode I'll discuss, but I will say that the show ran from 2008 to 2009 on the Disney Channel-owned Jetix channel, airing a total of 52 episodes, as is the standard. However, this show is kind of an anomaly, a fighter, a little scrapper, if you will. The first season wrapped up with 26 episodes, with the finale being a 2-parter, and then there was a 6-month hiatus between the end of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2. The show survived the bridge between Jetix's becoming Disney XD, but only just barely, as I believe the show was quietly cancelled afterwards on the channel, like in the middle of its run, or just very poorly advertised, or both. They quickly wrapped up the rest of the episodes on Disney XD, and reruns ended pretty shortly after. The show was broadcast to literally dozens of other countries on different networks, so the show also exists in many languages. Anyway, since the show was available for such a brief time in its most accessible form, one of the episodes, the debut episode of Season 2, titled The New Recruits, went lost when reruns ended in general. The episode is your typical evil clone plotline. It's not necessarily as special as a first episode of the season might be. This was so true that for a long time the English dub of this episode was lost, being able to be viewed online in different languages, most notably in Romanian and Russian, the dubs of which were both found in 2016 and early 2018 respectively. The episode did rerun pretty regularly on Disney XD, but like I said, it isn't the best episode of the series, so it probably wasn't recorded by many people, if at all. However, later in 2018, the English dub of the episode was found in full and is still available online, thankfully, but the Russian version has been taken down. This guy's whole channel got taken down, actually. The whole series can kind of be found in pieces online. I'm not sure if there is one official place to watch it, but I think you should give it a try. It isn't a particularly great show or groundbreaking in any way, but it does pass the Bechdel test. That should mean at least something. I would love to dedicate a whole video to this show because there is so much I can say about it, but I won't right now just to keep you on your toes. We're almost done here anyway. Some shows need only one pilot to sell a company on the concept, and some need a couple, but not very many have the chance to produce 3 without striking out. If you happen to be watching Disney Junior around 2009 to 2012, you may have seen Jungle Junction, a show about jungle animals who are sort of hybrids of creatures and vehicles, with wheels instead of legs. The show follows 2 main animals, Zooter, a motorcycle-like pig, and Ellie-Van, an elephant who is also a van. With no windows, I might add. Jungle Junction aired on Playhouse Disney starting in 2009, before it was rebranded to Disney Junior in 2011, with Jungle Junction being one of the staple shows at the new and improved channel's launch, however only lasting a year more, most likely due to the shows having aged a little and Disney preferring to make new shows for the new vibe of the channel. Jungle Junction had somewhat of a rocky end, but it had even rockier of a beginning. It was given 3 pilots before it caught on to anything, one made in general to bring the concept to life, one with a more extensive budget to create something more complete to use as a pitch, and the third was made specifically to pitch to Disney executives. We don't have any visual evidence of any of these pilots other than a singular screenshot of an early character model, as well as statements made by the show's production crew, which the most information comes from. We'll just go in order of each pilot's conception. The first pilot was created in 2003 when the show's creator, Trevor Ricketts, came up with the idea for animals on wheels after recalling a commercial he'd seen as a kid that showed a groundhog on wheels. He was working at Spider Eye Productions, Jungle Junction's production company, at the time of his coming up with the idea, expanding it into following multiple animals on wheels living in a jungle. With the initial title Wheelers, a group of employees at Spider Eye were equally interested in the idea, and helped Ricketts make a 6-minute-long 3D pilot, which used only one voice actor to provide the voice work. He would go on for 2 years using this rough pilot to pitch the show's concept to multiple European networks, with no luck, however. Though at the Cartoon Forum in Denmark, the pilot would receive a lot of support, and Spider Eye would gain enough encouragement from this to make a new pilot with newer, more advanced technology and techniques, particularly giving the pilot better lighting, more riders, and an overall different approach to and treatment of the concept. After the second pilot had been shown around for a while, it gained attention from a Disney executive in charge of the Playhouse Disney Channel, who was interested in making the show into one aimed towards preschoolers. The company would make a third pilot, this time with the intention of showing it to a preschool test audience, from which Jungle Junction would be given a green light and made into a proper series come 2009. Only a few differences were outlined between this pilot and the show, one being that Miss Jolly was named Jolly Jeep, and Zooter was instead named Rooter Scooter.
Down with me! 3, 2...
Team Umizoomi is an iconic show, and I need to stop using that word so much, but it is true for so many of these shows. The show is aimed towards younger kids, and particularly teaches math skills in the arena of basic numbers, geometry, deducing patterns, and measurement. Hosted by the titular Team Umizoomi, composed of 2 tiny little scrimble people, Geo and Millie, as well as a third robot character, Bot, all along with their car, the Umi car. The show details the adventures the 3 go on in an effort to solve problems brought up by the people around their town. It's kind of like the Wonder Pets, but with more of an emphasis on math, using it both to describe and solve the issues at hand. For example, in an episode where the team is called on to help deliver milk to the city from the one farm responsible for the whole city's milk for some reason, Millie uses her pattern power to reorder some of the milk takes at the farm, and Geo uses his shape powers to build a truck to take the milk from the farm to the city. In both instances teaching kids something about recognizing patterns and shapes respectively. The show aired in 2010 and ran for an impressive 5 years, ending its run in 2015 with a total of 78 episodes. In 2008, 2 years prior to the show's airing, you might know what I'm about to say by now, the show got a pilot created for it that was wildly different from the final show. First things first, the show was called something almost completely different. The title was The Umizoomis, spelled much differently, rather than Team Umizoomi. Interestingly enough, a trademark for this initial title was filed as far back as 2006. The biggest visible differences are in the characters themselves. Not only do Millie and Geo look a little more simple, their skin is colored much differently from their more human-like skin tones, with Millie being pink and Geo being blue, matching their clothing colors in the final show. Notably, the concept art and few images we have of the pilot also show off 2 other characters who we know little to nothing about, Zigzag and Alphonse. The wiki says that Alphonse's purpose or power in the show lies in shapes and geometry, much like Geo's does. Zigzag's purpose is unknown, and I will say that I found it unreasonably funny that the wiki just straight up assumes they need a purpose to be in the show, but I get what it really means. I just thought it was silly. There are some more minor differences, such as the Umi car being called the Zipmobile for whatever reason, and derived from a crew member's website. The theme song has both a different male voice and is performed in a different key. It sounds more like something that would be performed by a guest singer on Yo Gabba Gabba. It has that kind of a rock band is making a song for a kids show vibe to it, rather than the upbeat and punchy song we ended up getting. Multiple stills of the pilot, as well as a few clips, some hand recorded, are available online. There haven't been any official releases of this pilot, and other than what is already available and has been discussed in interviews, we don't know much.
Every Marvel film ranked in 6 seconds.
I am a big Marvel fan, not like the Phase 5 sucks type of fan, but also not the type of fan to even have to differentiate between phases to begin with, because to put it bluntly, I have a life and a boyfriend. I also happen to be a big fan of voice actors, and that right to love voice actors ends only at the heinous behavior of some of them, but nonetheless, both can be combined for this entry. I never did religiously watch many of Marvel's animated series that were on Disney XD. Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes is one such example of this. The show aired in 2010, and like the title suggests, it follows the main 6 Avengers: Black Widow, Hawkeye, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, and the Hulk, on comic book-esque missions to save humanity or something like that. From time to time, the show would feature more minor characters, both other heroes and villains. One of the guest stars who would recur in a few episodes was Spider-Man, having 4 episodes that he was featured in, although one of them he didn't speak in. Brief history of Spider-Man's voice before this point: there was a Spider-Man dedicated series that came before the show titled The Spectacular Spider-Man, in which Takashi Shirogane from Literally Voltron voice actor Josh Keaton provided the voice for Spider-Man, as he had in 5 separate Spider-Man video games, both before and during this show. I happen to really like Josh Keaton, and some people also agree with me on that, which is why this entry is on the Lost Media Wiki in the first place. Keaton as Peter Parker was a sound that, understandably after so long of a time, people had gotten very used to. So when Peter Parker Spider-Man opened his mouth in episode 39 of Earth's Mightiest Heroes and stupid Predator Drake Bell's voice came out, people were both confused and angry and probably rotating through the many stages of grief at different rates. I have the gift, or in this case curse, of knowing the future, so I know that Mr. Bell would voice Spider-Man in every animated appearance until 2017. Drake Bell also did provide the voice for him in Marvel Heroes and the game I just talked about on here, Disney Infinity, but that was pretty much the only game he saw during his stint as Spider-Man. I hope he rots, by the way. Ultimate Spider-Man had been airing for 2 months prior to this episode, but it was just assumed that EMH had been filmed already for a good while ahead, rather than still being taped at the time of it airing. Facebook fans of both the Spectacular Spider-Man series and Keaton's performance as such pointed attention to Drake Bell's name listed in the credits of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, confirming that what they were hearing was indeed true. Somehow Josh Keaton found this screenshot and commented, and this is a direct quote, "Wow, so they redubbed my audio. I recorded a few Avengers episodes as Spider-Man and was looking forward to seeing them. Typical Parker luck, I guess." With this new information provided from the man himself, people were now more angry than ever and wanted answers. Posts with tags #Josh Keaton is Spider-Man and #Drake Bell is not Spider-Man were made on Twitter to try and convince Disney to air or release Josh's version of these episodes, with no luck. After repeated outcry from fans with no response from Disney, Josh Keaton took it upon himself to state that this had happened to him a number of times before on different projects, but this also didn't mean that the animosity, only somewhat deserved by Bell at the time, had any grounds. Questions ended up making it to an executive who actually had answers, and the one they gave was pretty reasonable. That since Ultimate Spider-Man had already aired prior to these episodes of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, it might be confusing to viewers to hear Keaton's voice as Spider-Man after they'd already heard Bell starting 2 months prior. But higher-ups have also given the other end of the argument as an excuse for recasting people that kids literally either won't notice or won't care, so I don't know which has more of a solid ground to stand on. Bubble Guppies is a kids show from 2011 that I believe is actually still running. Good job! The show follows a group of mer people and school children, Molly, Gil, Gobi, Dima, Una, and Nani, as well as Zuli, all of which teach kids both social and somewhat educational lessons through skits and songs, along with their actual teacher, a fish named Mr. Grouper. This show is very cute, I think it's a really unique one, and the fact that it's set underwater is what drew me in. I love that kind of stuff. Like many of the other shows I talked about, this show has a pilot that hasn't been aired in any capacity. The pilot was created as a pitch as far back as 2006, and the show was given the go-ahead to be produced by Guru Studios in partnership with Nickelodeon. At this time, with a planned air date of the late 2000s, 10 episodes were produced before Viacom laid off over 700 employees, including many from Guru and the branch of Nick assisting them with Bubble Guppies. After this, the hero of every franchise or show on the brink of death, Wildbrain, picked the show up and helped continue it. The show had some adjustments made to it, more episodes were produced, and by 2011 the show had 20 episodes ready to hit the air. Since this pilot was made by a different studio, there are a number of differences between the concept art and few available clips of the pilot off of film reel compared to the show we got. We have pretty comprehensive art for each of the characters from the stage, as well as a couple of title cards for the show that are different from the final one. There are also a few screenshots of the actual pilot taken from a few clips that show the characters as being animated in a different manner in terms of the environment, and the characters have much different, almost stretched out proportions compared to the designs in the show. Mr. Grouper looks the worst of all. I do not trust this man, let alone with my children. The clips we have of the pilot show the animation in action, although any speaking is sort of drowned out by the music added in over this reel. This pilot hasn't been released in any way, and like I've mentioned ad nauseum, Nickelodeon is very possessive of pilots and most likely will never air it, especially since an entirely different studio was behind it, and since there was a somewhat bad air between Guru and Viacom after the firings, this probably won't happen. I love Lego. I have a ton of Lego sets, and I talked about Ninjago a month or so back, and that was a really fun video to make because of the love I have for Lego. I'm happy to be able to talk about it again by discussing Mixels, a fairly short-lived theme from Lego that revolved around making silly little creatures with little mixed-up handful of parts, hence the name, and since these were always little messed-up creatures rather than like a car or a plane or something, I was obsessed with these. I never did get many of the sets, but I did watch the show because this was still back when Lego wanted to give every theme a show to try to force it to live longer. I guess they still kinda do this, but it's not as prominent as it was back then. The show ran from 2014 to 2016 and aired only 25-ish episodes, each one showing the silly little mixels getting up to mischief and stuff. It didn't really have a plot or anything, I don't think, other than that there are many tribes of mixels with different color palettes and properties to them, such as the electroids being yellow and having electricity-based powers. In terms of both the show and the release of the poly bags containing the parts to create the mixels shown in the show, there were multiple series of these sets, with each series introducing 3 new tribes of mixels, a total of 9 series and 27 different mixels to collect. I want all of them. I have one, he's not put together right now, unfortunately. The show's reduced run actually came both because of the show and the line being cancelled fairly quickly, despite the actual sets releasing at a rapid rate. They just never did take off, I guess. Since the show was cancelled so abruptly, there are a lot of episodes in varying states of completion that were never aired. Billy West, who provided some of the voices on the show, has gone on record saying that, especially towards the end of things, production was very hastily done, and some people even speculate that more of these episodes could be finished, although not to the same quality as the others. We only know how far ahead the show had planned episodes due to an archive of a Cartoon Network service site providing production codes for Mixels episodes. And if you even just brush through the wiki entry on this, there are a lot of them. Other than this, we don't have any images of any of the episodes, but we do have access to unused scores that were more than likely meant for the episodes, as well as cast and crew discussions of episodes that didn't get aired or even produced. We don't know for sure how many of these episodes were completely done, and we probably won't unless somebody can come forward and confirm which ones just never aired, and which ones never even got fully made. This entry on the wiki is actually labeled as non-existent, but unless I'm missing something, one of the elements in question here definitely does exist, just not in the form it was thought to. Five Nights at Freddy's is a point-and-click horror survival game from 2014, and you already know that. The long-awaited movie releases in October this year, and you already know that. Leading up to the game's release, the creator, Scott Cawthon, released a handful of teaser images and trailers to promote it. After the first FNAF trailer was uploaded to Scott Cawthon's YouTube channel, a user commented regarding another trailer. Years after this, in 2020, someone contacted this commenter and asked them to elaborate. They confirmed that this trailer was no longer on Scott's channel, and even with searches of Scott's prior websites, nothing could be found. The trailer in question was said to feature an endoskeleton design that was different both from the final game and the first trailer's depiction. 3 videos were able to be found on Scott's Google Plus account, 2 of which made it onto his YouTube, with the final, a video simply titled Five Nights, being completely unplayable and lost. This was thought to be that second trailer with the endoskeleton, but there was no way to know for sure. The user who initially commented about the trailer later confirmed that he was in fact mistaken about the trailer altogether, confusing the appearances of the endoskeletons that would have been shown multiple times between the official trailer and what Scott had made public. The endoskeleton he thought was in a trailer was rather just featured in a still image. It is still unknown what the Five Nights clip is, and while it isn't the fabled endoskeleton footage, it is still a piece of FNAF's early history that has gone missing. I don't know enough about computer stuff or archival practices to know how this could get found, so if you know, let me know in the comments. Last but not least, we are at our last entry, folks. The torture is almost over. I am a big Nintendo fan. I am a big ARMS fan. Nintendo, however, is not a big ARMS fan. But for a time they were. ARMS is a video game made for the Nintendo Switch as a game available shortly after the console's release, meant to be a core game for the console as well as a game made specifically to take advantage of the dual motion capability of the Switch. You play as a character in a boxing type ring who has stretchy arms allowing them to reach across a given map to beat up their opponent. It's most times compared to Punch-Out, but Punch-Out doesn't have the silliest, prettiest cast of characters ever. I have a video on my channel about the lore of ARMS if you're interested in hearing every last excruciating detail because I have an obsession. There are 15 main characters in ARMS, you don't have to know them by name, but in 2017, a graphic novel series was announced that would expand on the world ARMS is set in and further develop the lore and characters. To be produced by Dark Horse Comics in tandem with Nintendo, who gave them fairly free rein on the project, the first volume shown off at New York Comic Con that year would be made available to the public in 2018. I was ecstatic for this comic. I was making absolutely sure to keep up with every update. I wanted it so bad. Fall 2018 came and went, and the release was moved back to 2019. Though some copies of the first volume were given out at an event for Free Comic Book Day on May 5th of 2018. After this, a delay was placed on it with no date being stated, probably as not to keep people's hopes too high, but also not to downright destroy them. They then proceeded to downright destroy them. Production would reportedly continue through February of 2020, but in March of 2021, the author of the comic confirmed that it had been cancelled. The first full volume has been scanned from the free comics handed out and can be read online, though I would love to get a physical copy. Since production continued for so long, one can kinda assume they got more than this one short volume done. There were reported plans to expand on characters' backstories, more than what the game ever could. So there may have been arcs and storylines planned out that we'll never see. I would love to see this comic either get picked up again or have all of its production material made public, but it looks like that might never happen, as the game is now 6 years old. And even with the series being revitalized by Min Min's addition to Smash Bros., I don't think enough people really value the game as much as I do, enough to where Nintendo finds it profitable or worth continuing. Hey, so... if you're not tired of my voice by this point and you made it this far, congratulations, you win absolutely nothing. I don't know what compelled me to make such a big Lost Media video. I wanted to do something really in-depth and, really interesting. I feel like a lot of my Lost Media videos are just kind of quick little bites of information, and I wanted to make something that somebody could listen to while they're doing something else, I don't know. So many things with this video were going so horribly wrong that, this video probably was very delayed. But, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next normal video.